Ultimately, what it leads to is every white woman that buys into feminism, which that's the main target. Let's not beat around the bush here. Jewish-led feminism is targeting white women to reduce the population replacement rate of whites so that we are outbred by non-whites that are invading our country at a faster pace. It's part of the accelerationism bullshit that's going on. In a way, feminism is one aspect of the ongoing genocide against whites. That's another very big topic to delve into. And I know that the guy that I'm reading this for, you know about white genocide, and that's quite a heavy topic to get into. Okay, so I'm heading back to the article now. It's talking about the various benefits of oxytocin, and it's important to note that babies deprived of caring touch can actually die from a lack of oxytocin. Orphans have been shown to display hampered oxytocin function well into adulthood. That is, orphans that have been deprived of touch during young childhood have cognitive problems, especially with self-control, and they act out a lot. They're very violent and impulsive into adulthood. I understand the reference that he's making here. So clearly, this molecule is crucial to life, crucial to a healthy life. Oxytocin release reduces fear and anxiety, quelling the amygdala, which is important for having the fear response as well as making us alert of danger. And oxytocin also suppresses the stress hormone called cortisol, which it's released when you're stressed out, especially when you're stressed out for a significant period of time. And when cortisol is released for several months on end without a significant break, then that causes lots of long-term damage as well. In other words, a long-term release of cortisol will cause a lot of neurological damage. It's not healthy for the brain, and the way that cortisol is mitigated is through oxytocin. In more down-to-earth speech, in order to de-stress, you need positive social contact and positive physical contact as well. And that doesn't have to be a sexual thing. That's something that used to be a staple of just positive friendship is, a warm hug, that sort of thing. But that aspect of our culture has completely been subverted from Jewish over-sexualization. But I'm repeating myself at this point. Oxytocin evokes a sense of contentment. It enables feelings of calmness and security by inhibiting an overactive, stressed out brain. And it helps you with controlling your behavior as well. When we're deprived of it, or we are all scatterbrained, we become timid and paranoid and anxious. And we shut ourselves down in a way. We kind of hide inside of ourselves. So trust and pro-social behaviors are increased by oxytocin. It affects social distance and friendship and plays an essential role in the romantic attraction and the subsequent monogamous pair bonding. As an aside to this, it's very important. The concept of protecting chastity is very important for pair bonding. When women have sex for the first time, the sort of neurological structures that are involved in pair bonding are at their peak performance to be able to connect with the first guy that they have sex with, which is why throwing away a woman's virginity was seen as such a horrific thing throughout all of history. If you look at the divorce rates, women that got married when they were virgins have the highest rate of staying with their partner, whereas women that have had multiple partners have a higher rate of divorce. The more partners you've had before getting married, the more likely the woman is to divorce the man, or the more likely the relationship is going to end up in a divorce. And it's dose dependent, where I'm stealing Stefan Molyneux's explanation of this. Stefan Molyneux has a great video about this that talks about the reality of marriage and divorce, where he talks about the divorce rates, and the more sexual partners a woman has, the more likely they are to have infidelity or to get divorced. So back to the article. Trust is increased by oxytocin, and it's very important for having a sense of romantic attraction and pair bonding. And we find receptors for oxytocin in the heart, in the vomeronasal organ, which are both directly wired to the hypothalamus and amygdala, pardon my poor pronunciation. Thus, we can detect oxytocin pheromonally, and when bonding in person, this fluctuates as mutual positive feedback. As an aside, if you've ever had a very strong, close, romantic relationship, you know how important the smell of the other person is. That sounds weird if you haven't had that experience, but to a degree, the whole pheromone thing, pheromones being important for attraction, that is very viable and very real. And also for the sense of smell is very, very closely tied with memories. Everyone has a unique scent to them in a way, and that affects your emotions when involved with pair bonding, involved with having a relationship relationship with someone of the other sex. What they smell like is very important for that very visceral emotional response of attraction and affection towards them. It's a very intimate thing, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't properly understand or haven't had experience with because of how atomized and how distant we are from such healthy, wholesome experiences, which used to be so common in humanity that it's hardwired into the brain. Moving on. This precious endodrug oxytocin is fundamental to the mechanisms of in-group bonding. In-group preference. It seems to me that there's a specific racial group that has sort of forgot how to have in-group preference. This precious endodrug is fundamental to mechanisms of in-group bonding, reaching from the family unit to friends, the tribe, the town, and one's country. It's even involved in our higher order feelings about nationalism, ethnocentrism, and religiosity. It's an enigmatic chemical when fostering togetherness. It's also involved with xenophobia and in-group evolutionary strategy. In a carefully controlled study exploring the biological roots of immoral behavior, oxytocin has been shown to promote dishonesty and outcomes favoring the group to which an individual belongs. In other words, you're more willing to lie to protect the people that you care about if you have a sufficient supply of oxytocin. You start to become more collectivist. You start to realize the importance of your place in a larger group. And that's a reason why Jews want to deprive whites of oxytocin, is because Jews want to dismantle any feelings of ethnocentrism and of nationalism, any feeling of bond amongst whites, so that we don't form any sort of resistance to this destruction of our culture and the destruction of our nations. Subverting oxytocin is subverting the people's will to fight back in a lot of ways, and it's inflicting brain damage upon the people who are deprived of oxytocin. And let's be honest, it's white men that are just not able to get oxytocin in the proper amounts, in the proper social context that would allow us to be healthy. I would say that men are more deprived of access to this than women, because there's such a negative portrayal of men in general that, let's be honest, women can go out and just ask a guy, hey, fuck me. Guys can't do that. So women can get physical affection and attention very easily. Men don't have that option. And I'm not saying that we need that option. I'm saying that we need healthier social structures to support better relationships between the genders. Moving on with the article, let's look at some ways that our modern paradigm deliberately interferes with and seeks to subvert our oxytocin expression. The center of all of this is cultural Marxism, again, Jews, and the concepts stemming from critical theory incubated by the Frankfurt School. Frankfurt School, by the way, is Jewish run. This cannot be emphasized enough. This subversion against whites, this subversion to destroy whites, is ultimately crafted by Jewish intellectualist bullshit. So these ideas of intellectual warfare were assembled to undermine and subvert the social fabric of Western white culture and to break down the oxytocin-mediated bonds of trust and community that maintain it. As an aside, it's been proven in a lot of studies that social capital is diminished in Western cultures today. Social capital is the amount of trust that people have towards other people in their community, and that is dreadfully on the decline. And atomization, people being isolated, not having anyone that they can rely on, atomization is increased massively at the same time. So people are becoming more spread out and less connected to one another. That's very well understood. All right, so moving on. It's almost laughable what's happening to us. Were it not the cause of such suffering that the authors of this strategy, based on Freud's cocaine-fueled navel-gazing, lacked the self-awareness to reflect on their own propensity for psychological projection. The far-left ideologies invariably horseshoe towards authoritarianism themselves, and without peer look no further than the unparalleled account of communism in the 20th century. But this discussion is not so much about the dialectic trap of left versus right. It's about the mechanisms through which high status have sought to preserve their position and cohesion at the expense of greater humanity and to extend the reach of their power. Again, he's talking about the Jews here. And by the way, Sigmund Freud was a Jew. Anyway, good old Freud was still pretty brilliant, and he hit close to the mark enough that we can add psychiatry to the list along horseshoes and hand grenades. His nephew, Eddie Bernays, took the torch and ran with it, taking the science of people's inner workings and applying it to groups of people, which is sociology. ideology in general. He wrote the book on propaganda in 1928, launching the sleight-of-hand enterprise known as public relations and steering the unfolding 20th century, as delineated thoroughly in Adam Curtis's Century of the Self. The Western cultural mindset has its feet rooted in the bedrock of Ice Age Europe. Its ethos of openness, cooperation, stoicism, self-control, and personal sacrifice towards the future of the community was an adaptation to the harsh environment that had made a very significant imprint on our brains. It made sense to help strangers and to contribute wherever you could. Since Ice Age Europe had a very low population density, intergroup competition was not as significant as a cultural stimulus as it was for more temperate and densely populated parts of the world. What he's getting at here is that whites have a pathological altruism to help people that are outside of our own social in-group. You don't see blacks trying to help whites in any fucking situation in any degree of significance whatsoever. You see whites bending over backwards to help out non-whites because we have this instinct to help people beyond our inner circle. Whereas every other race, basically, especially the Jews, have an in-group preference and don't put other people's needs ahead of their own people. It's how you play to win. You play as a team. You put first and foremost the wellness of your own people, the wellness of your own group. And whites don't do that to the same degree as all the other races, partly because we've been hit by so much propaganda in the last century about, oh, multiculturalism is so great and it's such a virtue to help people outside of your own in-group. But it's also part of this inborn instinct that we have to cooperate at a higher degree and to sympathize with out-group members to a higher degree than any other race out there.